Welcome back to another story on Infidelity Tales Lab. Before we begin, tell us, where in the world are you watching from? Now, let's dive into today's story. Chapter 1. The Foundation of Fury. Rob Castellano had built his empire from concrete and steel, but more importantly, from an unshakable principle. Loyalty was everything, and betrayal was unforgivable. At 42, he controlled a construction dynasty worth hundreds of millions, with projects spanning 3 states. His hands, calloused from his early days swinging hammers, now signed contracts that could make or break entire neighborhoods. The divorce from Linda had been finalized 2 years ago, a bitter affair that left scars deeper than any physical wound. She'd taken half his liquid assets, a staggering $47 million, but Rob had hidden the true extent of his wealth behind a labyrinth of shell companies and offshore accounts. What she didn't know couldn't hurt him, but what she'd done to him would never be forgotten. Their son Tyler, now 13, was the only light in Rob's increasingly dark world. Every other weekend, the boy would stay at Rob's penthouse overlooking the Hudson River, and they'd work on model cars or discuss Tyler's dreams of becoming an architect. The kid had inherited Rob's strategic mind and attention to detail, qualities that would serve him well in the war Rob sensed was coming. "Dad, do I really have to go to this thing?" Tyler asked, adjusting his tie in the passenger seat of Rob's black Porsche Cayenne. They were heading to the River Club, an upscale venue where Linda was hosting a pre-wedding gathering for her upcoming nuptials. "Your mother specifically requested you be there, son. We honor our commitments, even when they're uncomfortable." Rob's grip tightened on the steering wheel. The invitation had been a surprise. Linda rarely included him in anything anymore. Her upcoming marriage to some businessman named David Morrison was supposed to be her fresh start, her escape from the toxic influence of her ex-husband. Rob had done his homework on Morrison. 45 years old, divorced twice, claimed to run import-export businesses across several states. Clean background check, decent financials, no obvious red flags. Still, something fell off. In Rob's experience, people who appeared too clean usually had the dirtiest secrets. "I just don't get why she wants you there too," Tyler muttered, staring out the window at the approaching venue. "She hates you." "Your mother doesn't hate me, Tyler. She fears me. There's a difference." Rob's voice carried the cold certainty of a man who'd learned to read people's deepest motivations. Fear keeps people honest, or at least it keeps them careful. The River Club sat on a bluff overlooking the water, its colonial architecture speaking of old money and older secrets. Rob had actually helped finance the renovation 3 years ago, another fact Linda probably didn't know. As they walked toward the entrance, Rob noticed Tyler's pace slowing, his shoulders tensing. "You okay, kid?" "Yeah, can we make this quick?" Rob studied his son's profile. Tyler was usually eager to see his mother, despite the complicated family dynamics. Tonight felt different. The boy seemed nervous, almost frightened. Rob filed the observation away. In his world, fear was information, and information was power. The lobby buzzed with Linda's usual crowd: art gallery owners, fashion designers, and trust fund kids who'd never worked a real day in their lives. Rob moved through them like a shark through minnows, his presence commanding respect even from those who pretended to despise him. He'd worn his best charcoal suit, the one that made him look like he could buy and sell everyone in the room without checking his bank balance. Linda appeared near the bar, radiant in a cream-colored dress that probably cost more than most people's cars. At 38, she maintained the elegant beauty that had first captured Rob's attention in college. Her auburn hair was styled in perfect waves, and her smile was practiced and warm, at least until she saw him. "Robert, thank you for coming." Her voice carried the polite chill of expensive diplomacy. "Wouldn't miss it, Linda. Where's the lucky man? I'm eager to meet the person who finally captured your heart." The words carried just enough sincerity to hide the blade beneath them. Before Linda could respond, Tyler grabbed Rob's arm with surprising force. The boy's face had gone pale, his eyes wide with something that looked disturbingly like terror. "What's wrong?" Rob asked, his paternal instincts overriding everything else. Tyler's voice came out as a trembling whisper. "We're leaving now." He grabbed Rob's hand and began pulling him toward the exit with desperate urgency. Tyler, what? Now, Dad. Please. Chapter 2. The Face of Truth. Rob allowed his son to drag him outside, every parental alarm bell in his head screaming. In 13 years, he'd never seen Tyler this scared. Not during thunderstorms, not when he'd broken his arm falling from a tree, not even during the worst fights between Rob and Linda before the divorce. They reached Rob's car in silence, Tyler's hands shaking as he fumbled with the door handle. Rob helped him into the passenger seat, then slid behind the wheel, not starting the engine, but turning to face his son directly. Tyler, talk to me. What happened in there? The boy was staring straight ahead, his breathing shallow and rapid. When he finally spoke, his voice cracked with emotion. Do you know who Mom's fiancé is? The question hit Rob like a physical blow. Something in Tyler's tone, the way he said fiancé like it was a curse word, made Rob's blood run cold. His name is David Morrison. Beyond that, no. Should I? Tyler turned to face him, tears starting to form in his eyes. Dad, that's not his real name. That's Danny Martinez. He used to be your best friend. The world seemed to tilt on its axis. Danny Martinez. Rob hadn't heard that name spoken aloud in over 15 years, but it still had the power to transport him back to the worst period of his life. Danny, his college roommate, his best man, his business partner in those early days when they'd been young and hungry and foolish enough to trust each other completely. Danny, who'd stolen not just money from their first construction project, but Rob's girlfriend at the time. Danny, who disappeared one night with their company's seed money and Rob's fiancée, leaving behind only debts and betrayal. Danny, who Rob had sworn to destroy if he ever saw again. You're sure? Rob's voice was barely above a whisper. Tyler nodded miserably. He recognized me first. At Mom's book club meeting last month. He kept staring at me, and then he asked Mom about my last name. When she said Castellano, he got this weird look. Then he started asking questions about you. What you did for work, where you lived, if you ever talked about your college friends. Rob felt something dark and familiar awakening in his chest. The same cold fury that had driven him to build his empire brick by brick, deal by deal, victory by ruthless victory. But this was different. This was personal in ways that transcended business or money. Did he say anything to you directly? He tried to be friendly, kept asking about school, about our weekends together. But there was something wrong about it, like he was studying me. Tyler wiped his eyes with his sleeve. Mom doesn't know, does she? About who he really is. Rob started the engine, his mind already racing through possibilities and plans. Danny had always been smart, changing his name, building a new identity, working his way into Linda's life. But why? Was this random coincidence? Or had Danny specifically targeted Linda to get to Rob? The answer became clear as they pulled away from the River Club. This wasn't coincidence. This was revenge, delayed, calculated, and striking at the one thing Rob cared about more than his empire, his family. Dad! Tyler's voice was small and scared. What are we going to do? Rob reached over and squeezed his son's shoulder, feeling the boy's tension slowly ease under his touch. We're going to protect what's ours, son. And we're going to make sure that some debts that are 15 years overdue, finally get paid in full. As they drove through the darkening city, Rob began to construct the framework of Danny's destruction. The man had made one critical error. He'd revealed himself too early. He'd assumed Tyler wouldn't recognize him or understand the significance. But Tyler was Rob's son, raised to notice details, to remember faces, to understand that in the Castellano family, loyalty was everything and betrayal was a death sentence. Danny Martinez had returned from the shadows to claim his revenge. What he didn't know was that Rob Castellano had spent 15 years becoming someone far more dangerous than the young man he'd once betrayed. And unlike Danny's patient, indirect approach, Rob's revenge would be swift, total, and absolutely merciless. The game was about to begin, and Rob intended to win. Chapter 3. Gathering Intelligence. Rob's penthouse office occupied the entire top floor of the Castellano Tower, with floor-to-ceiling windows offering a commanding view of the city he'd helped reshape. It was 3 a.m., but sleep was impossible. Tyler was safe in the guest bedroom, exhausted by the emotional trauma of the evening, while Rob worked at his desk surrounded by documents, photographs, and computer screens. Marcus Wong, Rob's head of security and information gathering, sat across from him with a stack of files. A former Army intelligence officer, Marcus had been with Rob for 8 years and understood that some questions weren't asked. Only orders were followed. Danny Martinez legally changed his name to David Morrison 7 years ago in Nevada. Marcus reported, his voice clinical and precise. Clean paperwork, all official channels. But here's where it gets interesting. He's been operating under at least 3 other identities in the past decade. Rob studied the photographs Marcus had compiled. Danny had aged well, his dark hair now touched with distinguished gray at the temples, his face carrying the confident ease of a successful businessman. But the eyes were the same, calculating, predatory, and utterly without conscience. What's his angle? Money. Partly. Your ex-wife is worth approximately $52 million post-divorce. But there's more. Marcus opened another file. He's been methodically researching you for at least 2 years. Property records, business filings, social media posts from your employees and associates. This isn't opportunistic. It's a long-term operation. Rob felt the familiar coldness settling over him, the emotional shutdown that preceded his most ruthless business decisions. Family, no blood relatives we can find. Divorced twice, no children. His current identity shows businesses in import-export, but they're mostly shells hiding his real income sources. Which are? Marcus hesitated, the first time Rob had ever seen him do so. Identity theft, credit fraud, and what appears to be a sophisticated romance scam operation. He targets wealthy divorced women, gains their trust, marries them, and systematically drains their assets before disappearing. The revelation hit Rob like a physical blow. Linda wasn't Danny's target. She was his next victim. This wasn't about revenge against Rob. It was about money, pure and simple. Danny had likely discovered Linda's divorce settlement and identified her as his next mark. How many others? At least 4 that we can document. Total theft estimated at over $20 million across 15 years. Marcus pulled out another photograph. A woman in her 50s, elegant and smiling, standing next to Danny at what appeared to be a charity gala. Margaret Fleming, age 53, married Danny, then calling himself David Fletcher, in 2019. She was found dead in her home 6 months later. Ruled suicide, but the timing was convenient. Her estate was nearly empty. Rob's hands clenched into fists. Danny wasn't just a thief. He was a predator who destroyed lives for profit. And now he had his sights set on Linda. Despite their bitter divorce, despite her betrayal with her personal trainer that had ended their marriage, Rob felt a surge of protective rage. Linda was Tyler's mother. She was family, and Rob protected family, even when they didn't deserve it. "I want everything," Rob said, his voice carrying the deadly calm that his enemies had learned to fear. "Bank records, travel patterns, associates, weaknesses. And I want it yesterday, already in motion." "But Rob," Marcus leaned forward, his expression serious. "This guy is smart. He's been operating for 15 years without being caught. If he realizes we're onto him, he'll run." "I know." Rob stood and walked to the windows, staring out at the city lights. "But he won't run. Not yet. He's too invested in this score, and his ego won't let him believe I'm a threat. He thinks I'm the same stupid kid he betrayed in college." Rob's reflection stared back at him from the window, a man hardened by years of brutal competition, someone who'd learned that mercy was weakness and forgiveness was surrender. Danny Martinez had taught him that lesson 15 years ago, and now he was about to learn the consequences of that education. "What's the play?" Marcus asked. Rob turned back to his security chief, a cold smile spreading across his face. "Danny wants to steal my ex-wife's money and disappear. We're going to let him think he succeeded, right up until the moment we destroy everything he's built, everyone he's hurt, and every future he thought he had. And if Linda gets caught in the crossfire?" Linda made her choices. She chose to divorce me. She chose to take half my assets. And now she's choosing to marry a predator. But she's still Tyler's mother. Rob's voice carried the finality of a judge pronouncing sentence. "We save her from Danny, but we make sure she understands exactly who protected her. And more importantly, we make sure she understands what happens to people who underestimate a Castellano." The war was about to begin, and Rob intended to wage it on every front: financial, legal, social, and psychological. By the time he was finished, Danny Martinez would wish he'd stayed in whatever hole he'd crawled out of. And Linda would understand that her ex-husband wasn't just the man she divorced. He was the most dangerous enemy her new fiancé would ever face. Chapter 4. The Art of War. Rob's war room was a testament to methodical planning. In the 72 hours since Tyler's revelation, Marcus and his team had transformed the conference room adjacent to Rob's office into a command center. Wall-mounted screens displayed financial flowcharts, timeline graphics, and surveillance photographs. It looked like the headquarters of a military operation, which in many ways it was. Phase 1 is complete, announced Lisa Park, Rob's forensic accountant and financial strategist. A Korean-American woman in her early 30s, Lisa had earned her reputation by uncovering corporate fraud that others missed. "We've mapped Danny's entire financial network. He's sophisticated, multiple shell companies, offshore accounts, cryptocurrency wallets. But he made one critical error." She pointed to a complex diagram showing money flows between various entities. "He's been using the same digital signature pattern across all his identities. Same banking habits, same investment preferences, same timing intervals for large transfers. It's like a fingerprint." Rob studied the information with the intensity of a general planning an invasion. "Can we track his previous victims' money?" "Most of it, yes. He's been parking assets in a series of Swiss and Cayman accounts, but the patterns are traceable. More importantly," Lisa pulled up another screen showing recent financial activity. "He's already started positioning himself to access Linda's accounts. She's been moving money into joint investment vehicles he recommended." The manipulation was elegant and subtle. Danny was using his identity as a successful businessman to convince Linda to consolidate her assets for better investment opportunities. In reality, he was positioning her money for theft. Marcus approached the main table carrying a tablet. "We've got surveillance on his current residence, a penthouse he's renting under the Morrison identity. Expensive neighborhood, all paid for with previous victims' money. But here's the interesting part." He swiped to show photographs taken with a telephoto lens. "He's not working alone." The images showed Danny meeting with a woman in her 40s, blonde, attractive, wearing clothes that screamed expensive taste. They were embracing outside an upscale restaurant, their body language suggesting intimacy far beyond business. "Meet Patricia Novak," Marcus continued. "She's been with Danny for at least 3 years, possibly longer. Former model, now poses as his business partner. She specializes in befriending the wives, providing emotional support during the relationship-building phase." Rob felt his anger crystallize into something sharper and more focused. This wasn't just theft, it was a calculated psychological assault. Danny and Patricia were professional predators who destroyed families for profit. Where is she in the Linda operation? Already embedded. Patricia joined Linda's book club 6 months ago, positioned herself as a confidant. She's been encouraging Linda to trust her heart and embrace new possibilities. Classic emotional manipulation. The scope of the operation was staggering. Danny and Patricia had been preparing for over a year, carefully constructing the perfect trap. They'd studied Linda's psychological profile, identified her vulnerabilities, and executed a sophisticated long-term con. But they'd made one fatal error. They'd underestimated Rob Castellano. "Lisa, I want you to prepare forensic financial reports on every one of Danny's previous victims. Documentation that will hold up in court. Marcus, I need complete surveillance, 24/7 coverage, phone taps, if possible, financial monitoring. And I want background checks on anyone they've contacted in the past 6 months." "What about Linda?" Marcus asked. "Do we warn her?" Rob considered the question. Warning Linda would be the ethical choice, but it would also alert Danny that his cover was blown. The predator would disappear, and other potential victims would remain at risk. More importantly, Rob's revenge required Danny to complete his approach. Only when the man was fully committed, when he'd revealed all his methods and associates, could Rob destroy him completely. Not yet. Linda thinks she's in love, and women in love don't listen to warnings from ex-husbands they despise. Danny would convince her I was lying, trying to sabotage her happiness. We let them proceed with their plan until they're completely exposed. Rob walked to the window, staring out at the city where somewhere Danny Martinez was preparing to steal his son's mother's fortune. The irony wasn't lost on him. Rob was about to protect the woman who'd betrayed him from the man who'd betrayed him first. But this wasn't about Linda. This was about justice, about settling a debt 15 years in the making. Danny had taught Rob that loyalty was weakness and trust was currency to be stolen. Now Rob would teach Danny what happened when someone with unlimited resources and absolutely no moral constraints decided to wage war. "There's one more thing," Lisa said, pulling up a final screen. "I've been analyzing Danny's pattern of operations. Based on his previous timeline, he'll make his move within the next 2 weeks. The wedding is in 10 days. That's when he'll have legal access to Linda's assets. Then we have 10 days to prepare our trap." Rob turned back to his team, his expression carrying the cold certainty of a man who'd never lost a war he'd chosen to fight. Danny Martinez thinks he's the predator in this scenario. It's time to show him what it feels like to be prey. Chapter 5. Setting the Snare. The Harbor Club was Linda's favorite restaurant, an upscale establishment overlooking the marina where she'd often brought clients during her interior design career. Rob arrived 30 minutes early, choosing a corner table with clear sight lines to all entrances. He'd invited Linda to lunch under the pretense of discussing Tyler's upcoming school enrollment, but his real agenda was far more complex. Linda arrived precisely on time, as always. She moved through the restaurant with the confident grace of someone accustomed to being noticed, her emerald dress complementing her auburn hair perfectly. Rob stood as she approached, noting the slight tension in her posture. She was nervous about this meeting. "Robert, you look well." She accepted his gesture to seat her with the polite distance of former intimates who'd learned to navigate around old wounds. "As do you. How are the wedding preparations progressing?" "Wonderfully. David has been." She paused, searching for the right words. "He's been incredibly supportive, patient with all the details, understanding about my need to make everything perfect." Rob nodded, filing away her choice of words. Danny was playing his role flawlessly. The perfect fiancé who let his victim maintain the illusion of control while he maneuvered her toward financial ruin. "I'm happy for you, Linda. Truly. After everything we went through, you deserve someone who appreciates what he has." The sincerity in his voice seemed to surprise her. For a moment, the defensive wall she'd built around herself lowered slightly. "Thank you. That means more than you know." They ordered lunch and fell into the surprisingly comfortable rhythm of two people who'd once known each other completely. Rob asked about her design projects, her family, her plans for the honeymoon. He was charming without being intrusive, interested without being possessive. It was only when they were halfway through their main course that he made his first move. "I've been thinking about Tyler's college fund," he said casually. "With the market volatility lately, I'm considering restructuring some investments. Have you given any thought to his future financial needs?" Linda's expression shifted slightly, the first crack in her composure. "Actually, David has been helping me review my investment portfolio. He's had some excellent suggestions about diversification and growth opportunities." "Has he? That's generous of him. What kind of background does he have in finance?" "Import-export, primarily. But he's worked with investment firms throughout his career. He has a very sophisticated understanding of international markets." Rob nodded thoughtfully, mentally noting how Danny had positioned himself as a financial expert while keeping his claimed background vague enough to avoid detailed scrutiny. "Well, I'd be interested in hearing his thoughts. Perhaps we could all meet, discuss Tyler's future, ensure we're coordinated in our planning. After all, regardless of our personal history, we both want what's best for our son." The suggestion clearly made Linda uncomfortable. She'd spent 2 years keeping Rob and David in separate spheres of her life, probably at Danny's subtle insistence. I'm not sure that's necessary. David and I have everything well in hand. I'm sure you do. But Linda, Rob leaned forward slightly, his voice carrying just enough concern to plant a seed of doubt. Tyler is my son, too. I have a right to understand how his financial future is being managed. Unless there's some reason you'd prefer I not meet David directly, the challenge was carefully calibrated. Linda's pride wouldn't let her admit that her fiancé might have reservations about meeting her ex-husband. At the same time, Rob was positioning himself as the responsible father looking out for his child's interests. Of course not. It's just, well, you can be quite intimidating when you want to be. I don't want David to feel like you're judging him. Linda, I'm a businessman, not a monster. I'm perfectly capable of being civil to the man who makes you happy. Rob's smile was warm and reassuring. Besides, if he's going to be Tyler's stepfather, don't we owe it to our son to ensure we can all work together? The logic was unassailable, and Linda found herself nodding reluctantly. I'll talk to David about it. Perhaps dinner this weekend? Perfect. My treat, of course. Choose anywhere you'd like. As they finished lunch, Rob felt the satisfaction of a chess player who just placed his opponent in an impossible position. Danny would have to agree to the meeting. Refusing would raise suspicions and potentially damage his relationship with Linda. But attending would expose him to Rob's direct scrutiny, forcing him to maintain his false identity under pressure. More importantly, the meeting would give Rob the opportunity to begin the psychological warfare that would ultimately destroy Danny's carefully constructed operation. After Linda left, Rob remained at the table, making notes on his phone. The first phase of his counterattack was in motion. Soon, Danny Martinez would discover that some prey was far more dangerous than it appeared. Marcus called as Rob was walking to his car. We've intercepted communications between Danny and Patricia. They're accelerating their timeline, planning to move Linda's money within the next week, right after the wedding. Then we move faster. Is everything in place for Saturday's dinner? Affirmative. Audio surveillance, background support, and our financial specialist will be standing by. Danny's going to walk into the most dangerous conversation of his life. Rob smiled as he started his car. Danny Martinez thought he was about to pull off the perfect crime. Instead, he was about to discover that some debts never expired, and some enemies never forgot. The trap was set. Now all Rob had to do was spring it. Chapter 6. The Hunter Becomes Hunted. The Riverside Grill epitomized understated elegance. The kind of restaurant where deals were made over exceptional food and million-dollar handshakes happened over dessert. Rob had chosen it carefully. The acoustics would carry conversation while his surveillance team could maintain discreet coverage from multiple angles. He arrived early and positioned himself at a table with his back to the wall, a habit from his construction days when knowing who was behind you could mean the difference between life and death. At exactly 7 p.m., Linda arrived with Danny Martinez, now calling himself David Morrison. Seeing Danny in person for the first time in 15 years was like encountering a ghost made flesh. The man had aged well, his dark hair silver at the temples, his face carrying the confident ease of someone who'd never faced consequences for his actions. He wore an expensive charcoal suit and a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. Rob stood as they approached, extending his hand with the practiced charm that had closed hundreds of business deals. David, I presume. Robert Castellano. Thank you for joining us. Danny's handshake was firm, his eye contact direct, but Rob caught the micro-expression of recognition that flashed across his features: surprise, calculation, and something that might have been fear. The pleasure's mine, Robert. Linda's told me so much about you. All good, I hope. Rob's smile was warm and genuine as he helped Linda into her seat. Though knowing my ex-wife, probably not entirely. The dinner began with careful politeness, each man taking the other's measure, while Linda played the role of nervous mediator. Danny was smooth, deflecting personal questions while presenting himself as successful but not ostentatious, confident but not arrogant. Linda mentioned you're an import-export, Rob said as they studied the wine list. That's a fascinating business. What regions do you primarily work with? primarily Southeast Asia and Eastern Europe. Electronics, textiles, some specialty manufacturing. Danny's answer was practiced, containing just enough detail to sound credible without being verifiable. Challenging markets. The regulatory environment alone must be incredibly complex. Rob selected a wine he knew cost more than most people's monthly salary. I've had some experiences with international business myself. The cultural nuances can make or break a deal. For the next hour, Rob played the perfect host, engaging, interested, seemingly impressed by Danny's carefully constructed credentials. He asked detailed questions about trade regulations, shipping logistics, and market conditions, watching as Danny navigated the conversation with increasing discomfort. The man was good, but not good enough. Rob had spent 15 years learning to read people's weaknesses, and Danny's tells were becoming clear. He touched his watch when lying, shifted his weight when uncomfortable, and his vocabulary became more formal when he was uncertain. "Tyler seems to have taken to you well," Rob said as their main courses arrived. "That's important to me. My son's approval isn't given lightly." Danny's expression flickered almost imperceptibly. "He's a remarkable young man, very perceptive for his age. He gets that from his mother, and perhaps from spending so much time around adults. He notices things others might miss." Rob cut his steak with surgical precision. Details, patterns, faces. Sometimes it's almost uncanny. The threat was subtle but unmistakable. Rob was letting Danny know that Tyler might have recognized him, without making any direct accusations. It was psychological warfare at its finest, creating doubt and fear without providing a target for retaliation. Linda, oblivious to the undercurrents, began discussing wedding details. As she spoke about flowers and catering, Rob watched Danny's behavior carefully. The man was calculating odds, assessing risk, trying to determine if his cover was blown. "I understand he'll be honeymooning in Europe," Rob said. "That sounds wonderful. Switzerland is particularly beautiful this time of year." Danny's wine glass paused halfway to his lips. Switzerland, where several of his hidden accounts were located. It could have been coincidence, but Rob's tone suggested otherwise. "We haven't finalized our itinerary yet," Danny replied carefully. "Of course. So many options to consider. Banking capital of the world, I've heard. Very discreet financial institutions for those who value privacy." The conversation continued with Rob systematically probing every aspect of Danny's fabricated identity. He discussed import regulations that didn't exist, mentioned trade agreements that had been repealed, and referenced market conditions that were completely fictional. Danny caught some of the traps, but missed others, each mistake carefully noted by Rob for future use. As dessert arrived, Rob made his final move of the evening. "David, I have a proposition for you. I'm developing a new resort complex in the Caribbean, high-end, very exclusive. I could use someone with your international experience to handle procurement and logistics. The position would come with significant equity participation." Danny's eyes widened slightly. The offer was tantalizing, exactly the kind of opportunity a legitimate businessman would jump at, but also precisely the kind of exposure a criminal couldn't afford. "That's very generous, Robert, but I'm not sure my current commitments would allow. Think it over. No rush, though opportunities like this don't come along often." Rob's smile was predatory now, though still pleasant enough not to alarm Linda. "I've found that successful partnerships are built on trust and mutual understanding. Don't you agree?" Danny nodded stiffly, understanding that he was trapped. Accepting Rob's offer would expose him to scrutiny he couldn't withstand. Declining would signal that he had something to hide. As they prepared to leave, Rob shook Danny's hand again, holding it just a moment longer than necessary. "It's been illuminating meeting you, David. I have a feeling we'll be seeing much more of each other in the future." Walking to the parking lot, Rob felt the satisfaction of a predator who'd successfully stalked his prey. Danny Martinez now knew that his cover was blown, his operation compromised, and his enemy fully aware of his presence. The question was, would Danny run, or would his greed and ego convince him to stay and fight a war he couldn't possibly win? Chapter 7. The Walls Close In. Danny Martinez had always prided himself on knowing when to cut his losses and run. It was a survival skill that had kept him ahead of law enforcement and angry victims for over 15 years. But as he sat in his rented penthouse at 3 a.m., staring at surveillance photos of Robert Castellano, he found himself facing an impossible choice. Patricia Novak paced behind him, her usual composure cracked by fear and frustration. "We need to leave. Tonight. Rob Castellano isn't just Linda's ex-husband. He's a fucking predator in a business suit. I've been researching him since dinner, and this man destroys people for sport." Danny studied the financial reports spread across his glass coffee table. Linda's assets were finally within reach. Joint accounts established, investment vehicles in place, legal documents signed. They were less than a week away from the biggest score of their careers, and Rob's dinner invitation had been anything but coincidental. "He knows," Danny admitted, his voice carrying the bitter taste of defeat. "The Switzerland comment, the trade regulation questions, he was testing me, seeing how much I'd reveal. Then we abort. We've got enough liquid assets to disappear permanently. South America, Southeast Asia, we can vanish completely." But Danny's ego wouldn't let him surrender. For 15 years, he'd been the hunter, never the prey. Rob Castellano represented the one mark who'd escaped, the one debt that remained uncollected. Walking away now would mean admitting that his former college roommate had become more dangerous than him. Not yet. We're too close to the biggest payday of our lives. 52 million, Patricia. Enough to retire permanently. And if Castellano goes to the police? If he's been gathering evidence? Danny moved to the window, staring out at the city lights. Rob won't involve the police. This is personal for him, has been since college. He wants to handle me himself, which means he'll make mistakes. Emotional investment always leads to tactical errors. What Danny didn't know was that Rob's team had been monitoring his communications for days. Every phone call, every text message, every email was being recorded and analyzed. As Patricia and Danny debated their options, Marcus Wong sat in a surveillance van 3 blocks away, listening to every word. "Target is staying committed to the operation," Marcus reported through his encrypted phone. "Repeat, Danny Martinez is not aborting. He's planning to accelerate the timeline." Rob's voice came back cold and satisfied. "Perfect. Let him think he's still in control. What's his next move?" Based on intercepted communications, he's planning to convince Linda to transfer the remaining assets tomorrow morning. They're using some kind of urgent investment opportunity as justification. Then we trigger phase 2. It's time to show Mr. Martinez what happens when someone threatens my family. The next morning, Linda received a call that would change everything. Her bank's fraud detection department had identified unusual activity on her accounts, specifically large transfers being initiated by someone with access to her personal information. "Mrs. Daniels, we've detected attempted unauthorized access to your investment accounts," the bank representative explained. "Someone has been systematically gathering information about your financial holdings, apparently in preparation for a significant theft attempt." Linda felt her world tilting. "But that's impossible. Only David and I have access to those accounts." And she stopped, the implications hitting her like a physical blow. "Ma'am, we recommend you come in immediately to review the security logs. This appears to be a sophisticated operation, possibly involving identity theft and romantic fraud." Within an hour, Linda was sitting in the bank's fraud department, staring at computer screens that revealed the systematic manipulation of her financial life. Login attempts from IP addresses traced to countries she'd never visited. Investment recommendations that would have left her accounts vulnerable to drainage. Financial profile builds that read like intelligence gathering reports. "How long has this been happening?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "Based on the logs, approximately 8 months. The activity intensified significantly after you added David Morrison to your accounts 3 weeks ago." Linda's phone buzzed with a text from David. "Darling, urgent investment opportunity. Need to move remaining assets by noon today. Trust me, this will secure our future." For the first time in months, Linda found herself questioning the man she'd planned to marry. The timing was too convenient, the pressure too intense. She thought about Tyler's strange behavior at the engagement party, Rob's pointed questions at dinner, and David's evasiveness about his background. Her phone rang, Rob's number appearing on the screen. For the first time since their divorce, she answered his call with genuine relief. "Linda, are you all right? You sound upset." "Robert, I think I may have made a terrible mistake." "About David. About everything. Where are you right now?" "The bank. They're saying someone has been stealing my financial information, planning to rob me. But David is the only one who—" Her voice broke as the full scope of her situation became clear. "Linda, listen to me very carefully. Do not go home. Do not contact David. Come to my office immediately. And Linda, bring Tyler with you. He's not safe either." As Linda hung up and called her son's school to arrange an emergency pickup, she realized that the man she divorced for being too controlling and ruthless might be the only person capable of protecting her from the predator she'd invited into her life. Danny Martinez had played his hand too aggressively, and now he was about to discover that Rob Castellano's patience had been a strategy, not a weakness. The hunter was about to become the hunted. Chapter 8: The Predator Exposed. Rob's office had been transformed into a crisis command center. Linda sat in a leather chair beside Tyler, both of them staring at wall-mounted screens displaying the evidence of Danny's elaborate con. Financial records, surveillance photos, communication intercepts, and background profiles painted a picture of systematic predation that left Linda physically ill. For women, Marcus Wong reported dispassionately. 4 documented victims over 15 years. Margaret Fleming died under suspicious circumstances after Danny drained her accounts. Janet Walsh lost her family business and committed suicide. Christine Moore and Sandra Bell survived, financially ruined and psychologically destroyed. Linda's hands shook as she reviewed the police reports and financial documents. Each victim had followed the same pattern. A successful, recently divorced woman who'd been systematically seduced, manipulated, and robbed by a man they trusted completely. "The Patricia Novak woman has been working Linda for 6 months," Lisa Park added, pulling up social media evidence. Book club meetings, coffee dates, shopping trips, all designed to gather intelligence and build emotional dependency. "She's done this before with the other victims." Tyler sat quietly beside his mother, his 13-year-old mind struggling to process the scope of deception they'd uncovered. "Mom," he said softly, "I tried to warn you. At the engagement party, I recognized him from old photos in Dad's college stuff." Linda turned to her son with tears in her eyes. "Why didn't you tell me directly?" "Because you wouldn't have believed me. You would have thought Dad put me up to it." Tyler's observation was painfully accurate. Linda's distrust of Rob had made her vulnerable to manipulation by others. Rob remained standing throughout the briefing, his posture radiating controlled fury. Danny Martinez had spent months targeting his family, manipulating his son, and planning to destroy the mother of his child. The fact that Linda had betrayed Rob during their marriage was irrelevant now. She was family, and family was protected at any cost. "What do we do now?" Linda asked, her voice small and frightened. "The wedding is in 3 days. David expects me to transfer the remaining assets today. If you don't, he'll know we're onto him and disappear," Rob finished. "Which is exactly what we're going to prevent." Rob moved to the central screen, pulling up a complex flowchart that outlined the next phase of his operation. "Danny thinks he's closing in on the biggest score of his career. We're going to let him think he's succeeded, right up until the moment we spring our trap." The plan was elegant in its brutality. Linda would proceed with the asset transfer as scheduled, but the money would flow into accounts controlled by Rob's team rather than Danny's offshore network. Meanwhile, Rob's investigators would trigger coordinated law enforcement actions against Danny's previous crimes, freezing his existing assets and exposing his network of false identities. "But what about the wedding?" Linda asked. "He's expecting—" "The wedding will proceed as planned," Rob said coldly, "right up until the moment Danny Martinez is arrested for fraud, identity theft, and murder." The room fell silent as the implications sank in. Rob wasn't just planning to stop Danny. He was orchestrating the man's complete destruction in the most public and humiliating way possible. Marcus pulled up another screen showing surveillance footage from Danny's penthouse. Target is growing increasingly agitated. We've detected multiple calls to offshore contacts, apparently preparing for a rapid exit strategy. But he's committed to staying until after the wedding. His greed is going to destroy him, Rob observed with satisfaction. Danny always had more ambition than sense. 15 years ago, he could have stolen 100,000 and disappeared. Instead, he got greedy and took everything. Now he's making the same mistake again. Lisa handed Linda a series of legal documents. These will transfer your assets into a protected trust structure. Danny will see the movement of funds he's expecting, but the money will be completely beyond his reach. Meanwhile, we'll be documenting his theft attempt in real time. What about Patricia? Tyler asked, showing more strategic thinking than many adults Rob had worked with. Patricia Novak will be arrested simultaneously with Danny. We've identified her role in the previous victims' cases, including her involvement in Margaret Fleming's death. She's facing multiple murder charges across 3 states. Rob watched Linda process the magnitude of what they'd uncovered. Her fiancé wasn't just a thief. He was part of a murder-robbery team that had destroyed multiple families. The wedding she'd been planning was actually an execution date for her financial life and possibly her physical safety. "I'm sorry, Robert," Linda said quietly. "For everything. For not trusting you about David, for not listening to Tyler, for all of it." Rob's expression softened slightly. "You don't owe me an apology, Linda. You owe our son an explanation for why you nearly married a predator. But that's a conversation for after we finish destroying Danny Martinez." His phone buzzed with a text from Danny. "Robert, thank you for the dinner invitation. I've been thinking about your resort proposal. Perhaps we could discuss it further this weekend." Rob showed the message to the room. "He's trying to get close to me, probably planning some kind of double cross." Danny always thought he was the smartest person in the room. "What do you respond?" Marcus asked. Rob's smile was absolutely predatory as he typed his reply. "Of course, David. Why don't you come to the wedding? I'll make sure it's a day you never forget." 3 days later, Danny Martinez would discover that some enemies never forgave, some debts never expired, and some predators eventually became prey. Chapter 9. The Reckoning. The Fairmont Grand Ballroom was resplendent with white roses, crystal chandeliers, and the kind of elegant excess that spoke of unlimited budgets and meticulous planning. 200 guests filled the ornate space, unaware that they were about to witness the most elaborate takedown in the city's criminal history. Danny Martinez stood at the altar in his custom tuxedo, his smile confident and predatory as he watched Linda walk down the aisle. In his mind, he was moments away from legally accessing $52 million and completing the greatest con of his career. What he didn't know was that Rob Castellano had turned his wedding into a trap 15 years in the making. Rob sat in the 3rd row with Tyler, both of them wearing earpieces connected to Marcus Wong's surveillance team. Around the ballroom, federal agents posed as wedding guests, photographers, and service staff. Every exit was covered, every communication monitored, every aspect of Danny's network under simultaneous surveillance. "Target is at the altar," Marcus reported through their earpieces. "Patricia Novak is seated in the front row as planned. All assets are in position." Linda approached the altar with tears in her eyes, not of joy, but of rage and betrayal. She'd spent 3 days learning the full scope of Danny's deception, and now she was playing the final scene in his destruction. Her wedding dress was designer perfection, but underneath she wore a wire that was recording every word for the federal prosecutors waiting outside. The ceremony began with traditional elegance, the pastor speaking of love, trust, and commitment while Danny stood beside a woman he planned to rob and possibly murder. Rob watched with cold satisfaction as the man who'd taught him never to trust anyone was about to learn the consequences of that lesson. "Do you, David Morrison, take Linda to be your lawfully wedded wife?" the pastor asked. "I do," Danny replied, his voice carrying the smooth confidence of a man who'd never been caught. "And do you, Linda, take David to be your lawfully wedded husband?" Linda looked directly into Danny's eyes as she spoke. "I do, Danny Martinez." The name hit Danny like a physical blow. His confident smile faltered as he realized his cover was completely blown. Around the ballroom, Federal agents began moving into position, their casual poses shifting into tactical readiness. "I think there's been some confusion," Danny said, trying to maintain his composure while scanning for escape routes. "My name is David Morrison." "No," Linda said clearly, her voice carrying to every corner of the ballroom through the concealed sound system. "Your name is Danny Martinez. You're a con artist, a thief, and a murderer, and your criminal career ends today." The ballroom erupted into chaos as federal agents revealed themselves, weapons drawn, shouting commands for Danny and Patricia to surrender. Guests screamed and dove for cover while photographers, actually FBI surveillance specialists, documented every moment of the takedown. Danny bolted toward the nearest exit, but Rob Castellano stepped into his path like a wall of granite and retribution. "Hello, Danny," Rob said calmly, his voice cutting through the chaos. "It's been 15 years since you stole my money and ran like a coward. Did you really think I'd forget?" Danny's face contorted with desperation and rage. "You fucking psychopath. You orchestrated all of this." "I did," Rob agreed pleasantly. "I turned your greatest con into your final mistake. Every asset you've stolen, every identity you've hidden behind, every victim you've destroyed, it's all going to come out in court. You're going to spend the rest of your life in federal prison." Federal agents swarmed Danny before he could respond, forcing him to the ground while reading him his rights. Across the ballroom, Patricia Novak was receiving the same treatment, her carefully constructed facade crumbling as she realized their network had been completely compromised. "Danny Martinez, you're under arrest for fraud, identity theft, racketeering, and murder," the lead agent announced. "You have the right to remain silent." Rob knelt beside Danny as the agents secured him in handcuffs. "You taught me never to trust anyone, never to forgive betrayal, and never to show mercy to enemies. Thank you for the education. I put it to excellent use." As Danny was hauled away, screaming threats and curses, Rob felt the deep satisfaction of a debt finally paid in full. 15 years of planning, months of investigation, and 3 days of psychological warfare had culminated in the complete destruction of the man who'd betrayed him. Tyler appeared at Rob's side, his eyes wide with amazement and pride. "Dad, that was incredible. You destroyed him completely." "Yes, I did," Rob agreed, putting his arm around his son's shoulders. "And I want you to remember this lesson, Tyler. Loyalty is everything. Family is sacred. And betrayal is unforgivable. Anyone who crosses the Castellano family learns that some debts are paid in blood, reputation, and freedom." Linda approached them, still in her wedding dress, but now free from the predator who'd tried to destroy her. "Robert, I don't know how to thank you. You saved my life." Rob's expression remained cold as he looked at his ex-wife. "I didn't do this for you, Linda. I did it for Tyler, and I did it because Danny Martinez owed me a debt. You were just collateral damage that needed protecting." The harshness of his words stung, but Linda understood their truth. Rob had saved her, but not out of forgiveness or residual love. He'd acted to protect his son and settle his own vendetta. She was alive and financially secure, but she would never again underestimate the man she divorced. As federal agents led Danny and Patricia away, Rob felt the completion of a circle that had begun in college. Danny Martinez was facing life in prison, his stolen millions forfeited to his victims, his network of false identities exposed. Most importantly, he would spend the rest of his life knowing that Robert Castellano had orchestrated his complete downfall. The wedding guests were evacuated while crime scene specialists documented the evidence. Rob stood in the empty ballroom with Tyler, father and son, united by the shared understanding that loyalty was everything and vengeance was absolute. "What happens now?" Tyler asked. Rob looked down at his son, the next generation of Castellanos, raised to understand that family was sacred and betrayal was unforgivable. "Now we go home, and we remember that some lessons are written in blood, and some debts take 15 years to collect." Danny Martinez had taught Rob Castellano never to trust, never to forgive, and never to show mercy. In return, Rob had given him a masterclass in why some enemies should never be made, some families should never be threatened, and some men should never be underestimated. The debt was paid in full. And there you have it. Another story comes to an end. What did you think? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoy this story, consider joining our community by subscribing. It means the world to us. For more stories like this one, check out the recommended videos on screen. And I'll see you there. Welcome to Infidelity Tales Lab. We're grateful you've chosen to join us today. Tell us, which part of the world are you watching from? Big city? Small town? Country? We'd love to know. Now, let's dive into today's story. Chapter 1. Silent Calculations. Dominic Russo stared at the blueprints spread across his home office desk, the soft glow of his desk lamp illuminating the detailed designs. At 42, he had built Russo Construction into one of Philadelphia's most respected firms through sheer determination and ruthless precision. His weathered hands, calloused from years of work before he became the boss, traced the outline of what would become his masterpiece, a luxury apartment complex that would cement his legacy. A text notification pulled his attention away. His wife, Vanessa. Again, working late. Don't wait up. The third time this week. Dominic didn't reply, instead switching to the security app on his phone. The GPS tracker he'd installed on Vanessa's car weeks ago showed her at the Bellevue Hotel downtown, not at her charity committee meeting, as she'd claimed. Dominic's face remained impassive as he opened his safe and extracted a leather-bound journal. Inside was a meticulously detailed log. Dates, times, locations, discrepancies in Vanessa's stories. He made another entry, his handwriting methodical and precise, just like everything else in his life. They had met 6 years ago when his company renovated the art gallery, where she worked as a curator. Vanessa Harmon had captivated him with her sophisticated charm and ambition that matched his own. Coming from old money, the Harmons had initially dismissed Dominic as unworthy of their daughter, a self-made man with rough edges and no pedigree. But Vanessa had seen his potential, or so he had thought. The marriage had been good at first. They complemented each other, his drive and her social connections. They moved into Avalon Heights, the exclusive neighborhood where Dominic had always promised himself he'd live one day. But lately, things had changed. Subtle shifts in Vanessa's behavior, unexplained absences, and a coldness that had crept into their interactions. His phone rang. Mason Fletcher, his foreman and oldest friend. "You need to hear this, Dom," Mason said without preamble. Vanessa's car was seen at Walsh Estate Development's parking garage yesterday. Again, Preston Walsh, Dominic's competitor and the heir to a dynasty of developers who had looked down on him for years. The Walsh family represented everything Dominic had fought against. Privilege without merit, success without sacrifice. "You still collecting everything I asked for?" Dominic asked, his voice betraying no emotion. "Yeah, but Dom, maybe you should just confront her, man. This silent surveillance thing is... I don't move without certainty, Mason. You know that." Dominic closed the journal. "Keep me posted." After hanging up, Dominic walked to the window overlooking their manicured lawn. In the reflection, he saw not just himself, but the shadow of the boy who had clawed his way out of foster care, who had worked construction sites at 16, who had learned that trust was a luxury he couldn't afford. He opened a hidden panel in his bookshelf, revealing a secondary safe. Inside was a USB drive containing financial records, property deeds, and legal documents that had taken months to prepare. Beside it lay a business card, Diana Wells, private investigator. Dominic hadn't survived by being naive. He had been watching the signs for months, preparing in silence. Vanessa thought she was being clever, but she had no idea who she was truly married to. "Let's see how this plays out," he murmured to himself, a cold smile forming on his lips. Chapter 2. The Evidence Mounts. Diana Wells slid the manila envelope across the table at the quiet diner on the outskirts of town. Her silver-streaked black hair was pulled back in a tight ponytail, her eyes sharp from years of surveillance work. "You were right," she said simply. "Every Tuesday and Thursday at the Bellevue. Sometimes lunch meetings at Cristiano's. Always with the same person. Dominic didn't immediately open the envelope. Preston Walsh. It wasn't a question. Diana nodded. They're not exactly being careful anymore. These photos are from their last 3 meetings. The timestamps are in the corner. When Dominic finally reviewed the photographs, his expression didn't change. Vanessa and Preston, laughing over wine, holding hands across a restaurant table, entering a hotel elevator together, his hand on the small of her back. There's more, Diana added, sliding over a second envelope. Audio transcripts from the bugs you had me place in her car. They're explicit about their plans. Dominic scanned the transcripts, his jaw tightening only slightly as he read their conversations. Preston, when are you going to leave him? Vanessa, soon. I just need to make sure I get what I deserve in the divorce. My family was right. He was always just a stepping stone. Preston, your family never liked him, did they? Vanessa, God, no. They tolerated him because I insisted. My sister Brooke says she always knew he wasn't good enough. The conversation continued, detailing how Preston would help her extract maximum value from the divorce, using his family's connections to ensure Dominic was left with nothing. There's one other thing, Diana said hesitantly. Your sister Natalie has been meeting with Vanessa. This news finally caused a flicker of surprise to cross Dominic's face. Natalie was his only family, the sister he had protected through their turbulent childhood, put through college with his early construction earnings. You're certain? Diana pushed forward a final photo, Natalie and Vanessa in deep conversation at a cafe 2 towns over. Appears your sister has been feeding Vanessa information about your finances, your schedule, even details about your childhood that could be unflattering if presented to the right judge. Dominic stared at the photo for a long moment. How long? At least 3 months. He nodded slowly, folding the photo carefully and placing it in his inner jacket pocket. Thank you, Diana. You'll find a final payment has already been transferred to your account. Dominic, Diana hesitated. I've known you since you supervised the renovation of my office building 5 years ago. Whatever you're planning is already in motion, he finished for her. I appreciate your concern. As he drove home, Dominic called his lawyer, Theodore Gaines. Ted, implement phase 1. Yes, everything's confirmed. No confrontation yet. Let them think they're in control a little longer. He paused, listening. Yes, including the property transfers. All of them. And Ted? Include Natalie in the surveillance. Full coverage. That evening, Dominic watched Vanessa move around their kitchen, preparing a salad for dinner. She wore an expensive silk blouse he'd never seen before, likely a gift from Preston. How was your charity meeting? He asked casually. Productive, she answered without looking up. We've finally decided on a venue for the summer gala. The Bellevue. The Bellevue, he repeated. Nice choice. I hear their executive suites have an excellent view of the city. Her hands paused briefly before continuing to chop vegetables. I wouldn't know about their suites. No, he asked, his voice neutral. That's surprising, considering how much time you spend there. Vanessa's knife clattered against the cutting board. When she turned to face him, her expression was a carefully composed mask of indignation. What are you implying, Dominic? He smiled, the kind of smile that never reached his eyes. Nothing at all, just making conversation. For a moment, fear flickered in her eyes, but it was quickly replaced by calculation. She thought she was smarter than him. They all did. It was his greatest advantage. Later that night, he watched her typing furiously on her phone, no doubt warning Preston. Let them scramble, let them plot. Every move they made only entangled them further in the web he had been methodically spinning for months. Dominic returned to his office and made a call to Mason. It's time to move everything into position, he said. 1 week from now, exactly as planned. You sure about this, Dom? There's no coming back from it. Dominic looked at the family photo on his desk, him and Vanessa on their wedding day, both smiling. He turned it face down. I'm counting on that. Chapter 3, The Spectacle. The lawn of their Avalon Heights home was immaculate, the kind of perfect green that spoke of privilege and careful maintenance. It made the scene unfolding upon it all the more jarring. Vanessa stood on the front steps, her face contorted with rage as she flung Dominic's tailored suits and dress shirts onto the grass. Her sister Brooke and parents watched from the bay window, champagne flutes in hand, as if attending a theater performance they'd long anticipated. "Get out, you failure!" Vanessa screamed, her voice carrying across the manicured lawns of their neighbors. "I want you gone. Everyone was right about you." Dominic stood motionless on the sidewalk, his expression unreadable as he watched his clothes accumulate on the lawn. Curious neighbors had begun to gather, some pretending to collect mail or walk dogs while stealing glances at the unfolding drama. Brooke opened the window, leaning out with a smirk. "Told you she was too good for him," she called loudly, ensuring the gathering crowd could hear. His humiliation was public, complete, and, unknown to everyone watching, entirely orchestrated by Dominic himself. 3 days earlier, he had carefully planted fabricated evidence of financial troubles in locations where Vanessa would find them. Bank statements showing massive losses, foreclosure warnings, and a fake letter from a business partner pulling out of their biggest development project. Simultaneously, he had ensured rumors of his company's impending bankruptcy reached her family through carefully selected channels. The final touch had been the lipstick-stained collar on his shirt, applied by Diana in his office before being strategically placed in his laundry basket. Predictably, Vanessa had seized upon this evidence of infidelity, the perfect public justification for what she had been planning in private for months. Now, as he stood in silent dignity amidst his scattered belongings, a police cruiser pulled up to the curb. The spectators murmured with fresh interest as 2 officers approached. Vanessa's triumphant expression faltered. "I didn't call the police," she said, suddenly uncertain. "Mrs. Russo?" the female officer asked, climbing the steps to where Vanessa stood. "Yes, that's me. Has my husband filed some kind of complaint?" She gestured dismissively toward Dominic. "Because I have every right to remove him from my home." The officer's expression remained professional. "Ma'am, we're here to escort you off the property. It's not in your name anymore." Vanessa's jaw dropped, her face draining of color. "What are you talking about? This is my home." The male officer produced a document. According to county records, this property was transferred solely to Dominic Russo's name 3 months ago. "We have an order here stating that you're no longer a legal resident." "That's impossible." Vanessa snatched the paper, her hands trembling. "I never signed anything." From the window, her family's expressions had transformed from smug satisfaction to alarm. They rushed outside as Vanessa frantically scanned the document. "Actually, you did." Dominic finally spoke, his voice calm and measured. He approached, hands in pockets, no longer the humiliated husband, but something altogether more dangerous. "Remember that renovation agreement for the kitchen remodel? Page 7, paragraph 3 had a clause about property transfer. You signed it, along with the notary." "You tricked me," she whispered, the realization dawning in her eyes. "No, Vanessa. I simply play by your rules." Dominic turned to the officers. "I'd like my house cleared of unwelcome guests, please. All of them." His gaze moved to his in-laws, who had fallen into stunned silence. As the officers began explaining to a hysterical Vanessa that she needed to collect essential belongings and leave, Dominic's phone buzzed with a text from Ted Gaines. "All accounts transferred. Safe deposit boxes emptied. Credit cards canceled. Phase 1 complete." Dominic pocketed his phone and began calmly collecting his clothes from the lawn, folding each item precisely before placing it in his car. To the observers, he appeared as a man maintaining dignity in crisis. Only he knew this was merely the opening move in a carefully choreographed game of destruction. Vanessa's mother approached him, her aristocratic features pinched with fury. "You won't get away with this. Do you know who we are in this community?" Dominic smiled, the expression chilling in its sincerity. "Mrs. Harmon, I'm counting on exactly who you think you are. Now, if you'll excuse me, I believe the officers need you to vacate my property." As he drove away, leaving Vanessa and her family to be escorted off the premises, Dominic made another call. "Mason, prepare the wall surveillance package. It's time for phase 2. In his rearview mirror, he could see Vanessa frantically calling someone, undoubtedly Preston, her face a mask of panic. The mask she had worn throughout their marriage had finally slipped, revealing the truth he had always suspected was there. And now, everyone would see it. Chapter 4. Foundations of Revenge. The luxury condo overlooking the river had been Dominic's secret purchase 2 years earlier, an insurance policy against precisely this kind of contingency. Minimalist and functional, it suited his true nature better than the ostentatious home Vanessa had insisted upon. 3 large monitors dominated one wall of his home office, displaying surveillance feeds, financial data, and a complex flowchart labeled contingency plan. On his desk sat a chessboard, a game in progress with only a few moves remaining before checkmate. A knock at the door announced Mason's arrival. "They've taken the bait," Mason said without preamble, dropping a thick folder on Dominic's desk. "Vanessa moved in with Walsh yesterday. They're already planning how to rebuild after your supposed financial collapse." Dominic nodded, unsurprised. "And the rumors?" "Spreading exactly as predicted. Your bankruptcy is the talk of every country club and boardroom. Walsh is already approaching your clients, offering to take over your contracts." "Perfect." Dominic opened the folder, scanning the surveillance photos of Vanessa and Preston together at his estate. "And my sister?" Mason's expression darkened. "She met with them this morning. Handed over what she claims are copies of your actual financial records, trying to help them figure out where you might have hidden assets." A muscle twitched in Dominic's jaw, the only sign that this betrayal affected him. Natalie, who he had protected from their alcoholic father, who he had put through college, whose gambling debts he had paid off secretly to save her marriage. The records she gave them, they're the decoys? Yes, the ones you prepared. She has no access to the real information. Dominic nodded once, then turned to the monitors. "Begin phase 2, then, starting with Walsh Development's newest project." The next morning, headlines across local business news reported unexpected permit issues with Preston Walsh's flagship development, a luxury mall in the city center. Anonymous sources cited serious safety concerns in the preliminary construction, necessitating a complete work stoppage and review. Simultaneously, several of Walsh's investors received troubling financial analyses from a respected consulting firm, suggesting improprieties in how project funds were being allocated. The firm, secretly purchased by Dominic through shell companies months earlier, had impeccable credentials that made their reports impossible to dismiss. While Preston scrambled to contain these fires, Dominic met with Theodore Gaines at his downtown office. "The property transfers were just the beginning," Dominic explained, sliding a document across the desk. "I want you to file this immediately." Ted reviewed the paperwork, his eyebrows rising. "This is thorough. You've been planning this for some time." "Since the day I proposed to her," Dominic replied flatly. "I've never entered any situation without a contingency plan." "And your sister?" "The transfer of her condo ownership. Especially that." Dominic's voice was ice. "Implement everything exactly as outlined. No exceptions, no mercy." That evening, as reports of Walsh Development's stock dropping filtered in, Dominic received an unexpected visitor. Brooke Harmon stood at his door, her usual haughty demeanor replaced by obvious discomfort. "We need to talk," she said. In his sparse living room, Brooke perched awkwardly on the edge of a leather sofa. "Vanessa made a mistake," she began. "Did she send you?" Dominic asked, remaining standing. "No, she doesn't know I'm here. Look, our family has influence. This public spectacle isn't good for any of us. Maybe we can reach an arrangement, a quiet divorce, a fair settlement." Dominic studied her for a moment. "Interesting. You've never wanted to arrange anything with me before. What changed?" Brooke shifted uncomfortably. "We're practical people. This vendetta—" "Let me stop you there," Dominic interrupted. "Your father's company has significant investments with Walsh Development, doesn't it? And those investments are suddenly looking precarious." The color drained from Brooke's face. "Did you think I wouldn't know?" Dominic continued, his voice dangerously soft. "I've mapped every connection, every vulnerability. Your family backed the wrong horse, Brooke. What do you want?" "I want you to deliver a message." Dominic moved to the door, opening it. "Tell your sister and her lover that everything happening now is merely the foundation. The real structure hasn't even begun to rise." After she left, Dominic received a call from Diana. "You were right. she said. They're accessing the decoy accounts you set up. They think they've found your hidden assets and the special content we planted. They found that too. Vanessa was especially interested in the offshore account information. Dominic smiled grimly. Perfect. Keep monitoring. When they make their move, I want to know immediately. Later that night, he stood on his balcony overlooking the city lights, a glass of whiskey in hand. His phone buzzed with a text from Natalie. Dom, we need to talk. Please. Things aren't what they seem. He read it twice before deleting it without response. In his world, betrayal had only one answer, and it was already in motion. On his chessboard, he moved a piece. 3 moves to checkmate. Chapter 5. Structural Weaknesses. The exclusive Ridgemont Club had been the center of Philadelphia high society for generations. Preston Walsh's family had been founding members. Dominic had been admitted only after his marriage to Vanessa, and even then, with poorly disguised reluctance from the membership committee. Tonight, however, Dominic walked through its hallowed halls with the confidence of a man who owned the ground beneath his feet. Conversations hushed as he passed, members uncertain how to treat the supposedly bankrupt contractor. The rumors of his financial ruin had spread exactly as he'd planned, but he had chosen this moment to reappear in society. In the main dining room, Preston and Vanessa sat with her parents and Natalie, their tables centrally located to showcase their alliance. They froze mid-conversation when Dominic approached. "Good evening," he said pleasantly, as if greeting casual acquaintances rather than the architects of his intended destruction. Preston recovered first, his handsome face arranging itself into a mask of sympathy. "Dominic, brave of you to show your face here. I've always found courage comes easier when you have nothing to hide," Dominic replied, his gaze moving deliberately to Vanessa, who seemed unable to meet his eyes. "Perhaps we could speak privately," Preston suggested, clearly hoping to move their confrontation away from curious onlookers. "No need. I only stopped by to congratulate you on your engagement." Vanessa's head snapped up. "What?" Dominic raised an eyebrow. "Isn't that why you're celebrating?" The diamond on your finger suggested as much. The table fell into uncomfortable silence. The ring, an ostentatious emerald-cut diamond, had indeed been Preston's gift, but they had agreed to keep their engagement private until Vanessa's divorce was finalized. "How did you?" Preston began. "No," Dominic finished for him. "I make it my business to know things, Preston. For instance, I know about the offshore accounts you've been accessing. The ones you think belong to me." The blood drained from Preston's face. "Interesting choices you've been making with those funds," Dominic continued conversationally. "Especially the transfers to certain officials overseeing your development projects." Mr. Harmon stood abruptly. "We won't sit here and be threatened." "No threat, just an observation." Dominic smiled. "Enjoy your evening. I hear the lamb is excellent." As he turned to leave, Natalie caught his arm. "Dom, please. Let me explain." He looked at his sister's hand until she removed it, then met her eyes. "You're sitting at the wrong table, Natalie. But I suspect you'll realize that soon enough." The maitre d' approached as Dominic reached the door. "Mr. Russo, a gentleman is asking to speak with you urgently." In the club's foyer stood Commissioner Raymond Barnes, head of the city's Building and Safety Department, looking distinctly uncomfortable. "Mr. Russo, I've reviewed the documentation your office submitted regarding the Walsh development projects," Barnes said without preamble. "The structural integrity issues are concerning, to say the least." "I thought they might be," Dominic replied. "I felt it was my civic duty to bring them to your attention. We'll need to conduct a full investigation. All their projects will be suspended pending review. Of course, public safety must come first." As the commissioner left, Dominic saw Preston hurrying toward him, face flushed with anger. "What the hell did you do?" Preston demanded. "Me? I simply provided relevant information to the appropriate authorities." Dominic straightened Preston's tie in a gesture that was more threat than courtesy. "Information about substandard materials, compromised foundations, falsified safety reports. That's a damn lie, is it? The evidence suggests otherwise. Evidence that's now in the hands of not just the commissioner, but the DA's office as well." Preston's confidence wavered. "You can't prove anything." "I don't have to." The phantom offshore accounts you've been so eager to drain? Every transaction you've made has been documented, including your attempts to bribe officials using what you thought were my hidden funds. Understanding dawned in Preston's eyes. You set us up. No, Preston. I simply provided the rope. You and Vanessa chose to hang yourselves with it. Dominic checked his watch. I'd estimate you have about 48 hours before the indictments come down. I'd use that time wisely if I were you. Back in his condo that night, Dominic answered a call from Ted Gaines. They've taken the bait completely, Ted reported. Walsh tried to empty the decoy accounts this afternoon. The transactions have been flagged for investigation exactly as we arranged. And Natalie's situation? Eviction notice served this morning. Her husband received the photos of her meetings with Vanessa, along with the records of her gambling debts. He's filing for divorce and custody. Dominic closed his eyes briefly. This part brought him no pleasure, but in his world, consequences were absolute. Proceed with the rest as planned. The next morning, the front page of the Philadelphia Inquirer carried the headline, Walsh Development under investigation. Safety violations and financial irregularities alleged. Dominic read it over breakfast, then made a call to Mason. Activate the final phase. On his chessboard, he moved his queen. 2 moves to checkmate. Chapter 6. Structural Collapse. The Walsh family estate had stood for 3 generations as a symbol of wealth and influence. Tonight, its grand ballroom hosted Philadelphia's elite for what Preston had planned as a reassurance to investors and a show of strength against mounting troubles. Instead, it was about to become the stage for his complete undoing. Dominic arrived alone, his entrance causing a ripple of whispers. Despite rumors of his financial ruin, he moved with the quiet authority that had always distinguished him from those born to privilege. He wore a perfectly tailored suit, power rather than flash, and carried an envelope in his inner pocket that would change everything. Preston intercepted him immediately, steering him to a private alcove. You have some nerve showing up here, Preston hissed, his polished veneer cracking. I was invited, Dominic replied calmly, producing an invitation. That's impossible. I personally reviewed the guest list. Your mother added me last minute. She always did have a soft spot for me after I renovated her summer home at cost. Dominic smiled thinly. Lovely party. Shame it's your last. Preston's confidence wavered. The past week had been a nightmare. Building permits revoked, investors withdrawing, banks freezing accounts pending investigation. Somehow, evidence of safety violations and financial improprieties had materialized in regulatory offices across the city. Whatever you think you're doing, it won't work, Preston insisted. My family has weathered bigger storms than you. Perhaps, but they've never weathered me. Across the room, Vanessa was deep in conversation with Preston's mother, clearly working to charm the Walsh matriarch. She hadn't noticed Dominic's arrival, giving him time to implement the final phase of his plan. He approached Theodore Gaines, who stood near the bar strategically placed to observe the proceedings. Is everything ready? Dominic asked quietly. Ted nodded. The federal agents are waiting for your signal. The evidence package was delivered to the prosecutor this morning. And our friend at the Tribune? In position. The story breaks in tomorrow's edition regardless, but he's here to capture the arrest if it happens tonight. Perfect. Dominic scanned the room. And Natalie? Arrived 10 minutes ago. She's with her husband by the east entrance. Dominic saw his sister across the crowded ballroom, her face drawn with worry as she spoke urgently to her husband, Gregory. The photos Dominic had sent revealing her betrayal had devastated their marriage. She looked up, meeting his gaze with pleading eyes. He turned away. The moment had arrived. Dominic nodded to Ted, who discreetly sent a text message. Within seconds, the main doors opened and 6 federal agents in dark suits entered the ballroom, moving purposefully toward Preston. The crowd parted, conversations dying as the lead agent approached. Preston Walsh? The agent asked, though it was clearly a formality. Preston's face drained of color. What is this about? You're under arrest for wire fraud, bribery of public officials, and violations of federal building safety regulations. The agent produced a warrant. We have evidence of multiple transfers from offshore accounts to city officials overseeing your projects. Vanessa pushed through the stunned crowd. This is ridiculous. You can't just. Mrs. Russo, the agent cut her off. We have a warrant for your arrest as well, for conspiracy and accessory to fraud. As the agents began reading them their rights, Dominic approached. You did this, Preston snarled. You manipulated everything. No, Preston. I simply revealed who you truly are. Dominic removed the envelope from his pocket. The accounts you thought were mine, they were opened in your name. Every transaction, every bribe, every dirty deal, all with your digital fingerprints. That's impossible. I never. Technology is a remarkable thing, especially in the hands of someone with the right skills and motivation. Dominic glanced at Vanessa. You chose the wrong man to betray. As the agents led them away, the ballroom erupted in chaos. Dominic stood calmly at the center, the architect surveying his creation. Natalie broke free from her husband and approached Dominic, tears streaming down her face. Dom, please. I was trying to protect you, she begged. Vanessa threatened to destroy you if I didn't help her. I was feeding her false information, trying to buy time. Stop. Dominic's voice was quiet but cut through her excuses like a blade. I saw the bank transfers, Natalie. $50,000 from Preston to your account the day after you gave them access to what you thought were my financial records. Her face crumpled. I needed the money for Gregory's medical treatments. Our insurance wouldn't cover it. I was desperate. You could have come to me. I did. 3 months ago. You said business was tight and you couldn't help. For the first time that night, Dominic's composure faltered. What are you talking about? I came to your office. Explained about Gregory's experimental treatment. You said you couldn't spare the cash. Dominic's mind raced back. 3 months ago, he had been in the middle of orchestrating his plan against Vanessa and Preston. He remembered Natalie's visit, but had been distracted, dismissive. You never mentioned it was for medical treatments, he said slowly. I was too proud to beg. Natalie wiped at her tears. When Preston approached me later, offering money for information, I took it. But Dom, I swear, I only gave them what you would want them to see. I was playing both sides. Before Dominic could respond, Gregory joined them, placing a protective arm around Natalie. It's true, he said, his voice weak from his illness. She was trying to help me, and help you too. The details she gave them were deliberately misleading. Dominic looked between them, centuries of distrust warring with the evidence before him. Finally, he spoke. We'll discuss this later. For now, you both need to leave. What happens next isn't something you want to witness. As they departed, Ted approached. The press is having a field day. The Walsh Empire is collapsing in real time. And the Harmons? Mr. Harmon just received notification that his investment firm's assets are frozen pending investigation of their connection to Walsh Development. Dominic nodded, satisfaction coursing through him. And the final piece? In place. When they post bail, if they can post bail, they'll find there's nowhere to run. Outside the estate, as reporters swarmed and camera flashes illuminated the night, Dominic walked calmly to his car. Behind him, the Walsh legacy crumbled, exactly as he had designed it. On the chessboard of his mind, he moved his final piece. Checkmate. Chapter 7. Among the Ruins. The downtown courthouse steps were crowded with reporters when Vanessa and Preston emerged from their bail hearing. They had spent 3 nights in custody before Preston's mother had managed to arrange the substantial funds required for their release. The terms were strict: surrender of passports, electronic monitoring, and prohibition from accessing any financial accounts beyond a court-approved allowance for basic living expenses. Preston's face was haggard, his designer suit replaced by a department store alternative that hung poorly on his frame. Vanessa, however, maintained a facade of defiance as cameras flashed around them. She had spent years cultivating her public image, and even now believed she could salvage something from the wreckage. My husband orchestrated this entire situation out of spite, she declared to the gathered press. Preston and I are innocent victims of his vindictive scheme. When the truth comes out, we will be completely exonerated. From across the street, Dominic watched the performance from inside his car, unmoved by her attempts to rewrite the narrative. Beside him sat Diana Wells, who had been instrumental in documenting every aspect of their conspiracy. She's still trying to spin it, Diana observed. Let her try, Dominic replied. The evidence speaks for itself. The evidence was indeed overwhelming. Hundreds of pages of documentation showing how Preston had cut corners on building safety, bribed officials, and misled investors. Equally damning were recorded conversations between Preston and Vanessa discussing their plans to take everything from Dominic. What they didn't know, what they couldn't possibly comprehend, was that every move they had made in the past 6 months had been anticipated and subtly guided by Dominic's invisible hand. As Vanessa and Preston pushed through the media scrum toward their waiting car, Dominic made a call. Release the financial records, he instructed Ted. All of them. Within the hour, every major news outlet received comprehensive documentation of Preston's financial misdeeds, not just those related to his development projects, but personal indiscretions as well, tax evasion, hidden assets, and misappropriation of family funds. The Walsh family matriarch, who had reluctantly secured her son's bail, received her own special delivery, evidence that Preston had been quietly selling off family heirlooms and artworks, replacing them with forgeries to fund his lifestyle and affair with Vanessa. By evening, Preston's bail had been revoked after his mother reported the theft of family assets, sending him back to detention. Vanessa, suddenly alone and facing mounting legal troubles, retreated to a modest hotel, the only accommodation her court-approved allowance would permit. That night, Dominic met with Natalie and Gregory at their small suburban home. The atmosphere was tense, years of trust shattered between them. The treatment is working, Natalie said quietly after serving coffee in their modest living room. The doctors say Gregory's showing significant improvement. Dominic nodded, studying his brother-in-law's healthier appearance. I'm glad. Dom, Gregory began. What Natalie did was a betrayal, Dominic finished for him. One I'm still processing. I never gave them anything that would truly hurt you, Natalie insisted. Everything was calculated to make them think they had an advantage while actually leading them into your trap. Dominic set down his cup. If that's true, why take their money? Because we were desperate. Tears formed in Natalie's eyes. The experimental treatment cost $200,000. Our insurance wouldn't cover it. When you turned me down, I never turned you down for medical expenses, Dominic interrupted. You never mentioned Gregory was sick. I told you he needed specialized treatment. You were distracted, looking at some blueprint. You said business was tight and changed the subject. Dominic searched his memory, recalling the day in question. He had been finalizing plans for the trap he was setting for Vanessa and Preston, his focus singular. I failed you, he finally acknowledged. And you betrayed me in return. The silence that followed was heavy with decades of shared history. The foster homes they had endured together, the protection he had provided, the opportunities he had created for her. The question now, Dominic continued, is where we go from here. Natalie reached for her husband's hand. What happens to us depends on you, doesn't it? Just like it always has. Dominic stood, moving to the window to look out at the quiet street. This house, their house, was technically his now. One of the many properties he had quietly transferred to his name as part of his contingency plan. He could evict them tomorrow if he chose. Gregory's treatment, he said at length. Is there more needed? Yes, Gregory answered. Another 6 months at least. Dominic turned back to face them. I'll cover it. All of it. And this house stays in your name. Relief washed over their faces, but it was short-lived. But, Dominic continued, we're not family anymore. Not after this. The treatment gets paid for. The house is yours, but that's the end. Dom, please, Natalie began, but he raised a hand to silence her. You made your choice. I'm making mine. He moved to the door. I don't forgive betrayal, Natalie. Not even from you. As he drove away, his phone rang. It was Mason. You need to see this, Mason said without preamble. Vanessa just went on local news. She's painting herself as a domestic abuse victim, claiming you manipulated and controlled her throughout your marriage. Dominic's grip tightened on the steering wheel. Send me the clip. Watching the interview later in his condo, he observed Vanessa's masterful performance. Tears at the right moments, careful wording that implied without directly claiming, the perfect blend of vulnerability and indignation. He isolated me from my family, she told the sympathetic interviewer. Controlled our finances. When I finally found the courage to leave, he orchestrated this elaborate scheme to destroy me. It was compelling television. It was also completely false. She's good, Diana commented, watching alongside him. People might actually believe her. Some will, Dominic agreed. But not for long. He opened his laptop and began typing instructions to Ted, outlining the final phase of his plan. The contingency he had hoped wouldn't be necessary, but had prepared for nonetheless. It was time to ensure that Vanessa Russo would never reinvent herself again. Chapter 8. The Final Blueprint. The luxury rehabilitation facility was nestled in the Pocono Mountains, its sprawling grounds and discreet security providing privacy for wealthy clients recovering from various addictions. Preston Walsh had checked himself in 3 days after being released on bail a second time, claiming prescription drug dependency brought on by the stress of his legal troubles. In reality, he was hiding from the press, from his family's recriminations, and from Vanessa's increasingly desperate attempts to contact him. He sat alone on a private balcony overlooking the mountains, nursing a permitted glass of sparkling water when a staff member approached. "Mr. Walsh, you have a visitor." Preston turned, expecting his lawyer. Instead, he found himself face to face with Dominic Russo. "What did you get in here?" Preston demanded, instinctively backing away. "I own controlling interest in the parent company that manages this facility," Dominic replied calmly, taking the seat opposite him. "I own many things you wouldn't expect." Preston's hand trembled slightly as he set down his glass. "What do you want? Haven't you done enough?" "That depends entirely on your perspective." Dominic crossed his legs comfortably. "I'm here to offer you a proposition. I'm not interested in anything you have to offer. Not even your freedom, the return of some of your assets, a chance to rebuild some semblance of life." Preston's expression shifted from defiance to wary interest. "What's the catch?" "Vanessa." Dominic produced a folder. "I need your full testimony about her role in everything, the planning, the manipulation, her ideas for how to destroy me. All of it, under oath, with supporting evidence. You want me to throw her under the bus. I want the truth documented. You were both architects of my intended destruction. Now you can choose to be the one who walks away with something left." Preston hesitated only briefly before reaching for the folder. "What kind of deal are we talking about?" "You plead guilty to reduced charges, provide complete testimony against Vanessa, and surrender certain assets. In exchange, my influence ensures a minimal sentence, possibly even home confinement. You keep your family home and enough resources to start over, albeit on a much smaller scale." "And if I refuse?" Dominic's smile was cold. "Then the additional evidence I've been withholding gets submitted to the prosecutor tomorrow, including details about your previous legal troubles in Boston that your family worked so hard to bury." The color drained from Preston's face. "How could you possibly know about that?" "I know everything about everyone who enters my life, Preston. It's how I've survived." Back in the city, Vanessa was making a last desperate attempt to salvage her situation. She had arranged a meeting with Dominic's lawyer, Theodore Gaines, hoping to negotiate some kind of settlement. In Ted's austere office, she put on her most contrite expression. "I made a terrible mistake," she said, her voice carefully modulated to convey regret. "I let Preston manipulate me into betraying Dominic. I see that now." Ted's face remained impassive. "Mrs. Russo, let's not waste each other's time. We both know that's not what happened. It's my word against Preston's, and he's desperate enough to say anything." She leaned forward. "I still care for Dominic. All I'm asking for is enough to start over quietly. I'll sign whatever non-disclosure agreement you want. An interesting proposal. Unfortunately, it's not just Preston's word against yours." Ted opened his laptop, turning the screen toward her. "We have extensive documentation of your conversations planning Dominic's downfall. Voice recordings, text messages, emails, meeting notes in your handwriting detailing how to maximize the financial damage." Vanessa's confident facade cracked slightly. "Those could be manipulated, perhaps, but the video footage would be harder to explain away." He played a clip from what was clearly a hidden camera in Preston's office. Vanessa's voice came through with perfect clarity. I married him for his potential, but Preston, you're already everything he's trying to become. Once we've stripped him of everything, we can finally be together openly. Vanessa's face hardened as the enormity of her situation became clear. What does he want? Complete surrender. You sign over any remaining claims to marital assets, agree to never speak publicly about him again, and face the criminal charges without dragging his name through further mud. And if I refuse, then by this time tomorrow, every news outlet in the country will have footage of your most private conversations with Preston. Not just the plotting, but the intimate moments as well. Vanessa blanched. He wouldn't dare. That's revenge porn. It's illegal. The footage would be carefully edited to remove anything explicit while leaving the damning context intact. And it would come from an anonymous source impossible to trace back to Dominic. Ted, close the laptop. He's offering you a chance to retain some dignity, Mrs. Russo. I suggest you take it. That evening, Dominic sat in his condo, reviewing the day's developments. Preston had signed the agreement, choosing self-preservation over loyalty to Vanessa. Ted had reported that Vanessa was considering her options, which both men understood was merely delaying the inevitable. A knock at the door surprised him. Opening it, he found Brooke Harmon standing in the hallway, her usual haughty demeanor replaced by evident distress. "May I come in?" she asked, her voice uncharacteristically subdued. Dominic stepped aside, allowing her to enter. "This is unexpected. Believe me, this isn't a social call." Brooke paced the living room nervously. "My father suffered a heart attack this morning. The doctors say the stress of his firm's asset freeze was a contributing factor." "I'm sorry to hear that," Dominic said, his tone neutral. "Is there a point to this visit? My father built that firm from nothing. It's his life's work. The frozen assets are crippling not just him, but dozens of employees who had nothing to do with Vanessa's choices. Collateral damage," Dominic observed dispassionately. "Unfortunately, unavoidable." Brooke stopped pacing to face him directly. "What do you want, Dominic? What would it take to call off this scorched earth campaign?" "Why would I do that? Your father, your entire family, made it abundantly clear that I was never good enough, that I was merely a stepping stone for Vanessa." "We were wrong," Brooke admitted, the words clearly difficult for her. "You're nothing like what we thought. You're far more dangerous." A cold smile touched Dominic's lips. "Now that is the first honest thing your family has ever said to me. Please, my father might not survive another shock like this. He's not a young man." Dominic considered her for a long moment. "Your family's firm stays frozen until the investigation is complete. That's non-negotiable. But I could ensure the investigation focuses solely on transactions related to Walsh Development, leaving the rest operational." Hope flickered in Brooke's eyes. "You would do that? On one condition. Name it." "I want a full written confession from you detailing how your family encouraged Vanessa to use me for my growing success while planning for her to eventually leave with maximum financial gain. I want dates, conversations, specific plots. Everything." Brooke paled. "That would destroy our family's reputation." "Yes," Dominic agreed simply. "It would. I can't do that. Then we have nothing more to discuss." He moved toward the door. "Wait," Brooke called. What if I gave you information instead? Something you don't know yet." Dominic paused. "I'm listening." "Vanessa is pregnant. With Preston's child." Brooke watched his face carefully. "She found out just before everything happened. That's why they were accelerating their plans against you." For the first time in their conversation, genuine surprise registered on Dominic's face. This was the one variable he hadn't anticipated. "She hasn't told you because she's planning to use it for sympathy in the media," Brooke continued. "Play the expectant mother card to garner public support." Dominic recovered quickly. "Thank you for the information. I'll have Ted draft the paperwork to isolate your father's legitimate business interest from the investigation." After Brooke left, Dominic made a call to Diana. "I need confirmation on a pregnancy claim," he instructed. "And if it's true, I need to adjust our strategy accordingly." The game had changed, but like any master architect, Dominic knew how to modify his blueprints when unexpected conditions arose. His revenge would not be denied. It would simply be redesigned. Chapter 9. The Final Reckoning. Rain fell steadily on the day of the hearing, washing the city streets clean as Dominic arrived at the courthouse. Inside, the atmosphere was tense as attorneys for all parties gathered in the judge's chambers for what would determine the direction of both the civil and criminal proceedings. Preston Walsh sat with his attorney, looking diminished in an off-the-rack suit, his usual confidence replaced by resignation. Across the room, Vanessa maintained her composure, though the strain of recent weeks showed in the shadows beneath her eyes. The pregnancy Brooke had revealed was not yet visible beneath her conservative dress. Judge Margaret Holloway, known for her no-nonsense approach, reviewed the documents before her with methodical precision. "Before we proceed," she began, "I want to be clear that I've reviewed all submitted evidence and find it disturbing, to say the least." Her sharp gaze moved from Vanessa to Preston. "Mr. Walsh, you've agreed to testify against Mrs. Russo in exchange for consideration in your sentencing. Is that correct?" "Yes, Your Honor," Preston confirmed, avoiding Vanessa's glare. "And Mrs. Russo, you maintain that you were manipulated by both your husband and Mr. Walsh." "That's correct, Your Honor," Vanessa responded, her voice steady. "I was caught between two controlling men." Judge Holloway's expression remained skeptical. "I see. And the extensive documentation of your planning sessions with Mr. Walsh? The recorded conversations where you explicitly discussed, and I quote, taking Dominic for everything he's worth?" Vanessa hesitated. "Those recordings lack context, Your Honor." "I disagree." Judge Holloway set down the papers. "Based on the evidence before me, I'm inclined to proceed with the full range of charges against both of you. However, there's been a motion filed that offers an alternative resolution." She nodded to Theodore Gaines, who stood. "Your Honor, my client, Mr. Russo, is willing to withdraw certain civil claims and recommend leniency in the criminal charges under very specific conditions." The judge raised an eyebrow. "Proceed, counselor." Ted laid out the terms. Vanessa and Preston would both plead guilty to reduced charges, avoiding maximum sentences. In exchange, they would surrender all claims to disputed assets, sign comprehensive non-disclosure agreements, and both would leave the state permanently after serving their sentences. Additionally, Preston would divest himself from any Philadelphia real estate ventures. "And there's one more condition," Ted added. "Mrs. Russo will agree to a paternity test for her unborn child. And if Mr. Russo is excluded as the father, she waives any future claims of child support or inheritance from him." Vanessa visibly flinched. She had not yet publicly acknowledged the pregnancy, intending to use it strategically later. "How did you?" she began, then fell silent under the judge's stern gaze. "Is this arrangement acceptable to the prosecution?" Judge Holloway asked the district attorney. "Given the overwhelming evidence Mr. Russo has provided in both cases, and his cooperation as the primary victim, we are amenable to these terms, Your Honor." The judge turned to Vanessa and Preston. "You have 15 minutes to consult with your attorneys and decide. Choose wisely." Outside the chambers, in a quiet corridor of the courthouse, Dominic stood alone by a window, watching the rain. Footsteps approached, and he turned to find Vanessa standing before him. "You knew," she said quietly. "About the baby. I know everything, Vanessa. That was always your mistake, underestimating me." She studied him, searching for any crack in his resolve. "What happened to you? The Dominic I married wasn't this calculating. He was," Dominic corrected her. "You just never bothered to look beyond the surface. Too focused on what I could provide, what I could become. And this is your revenge? Forcing me to admit my child isn't yours? Making me leave the state?" "No." Dominic stepped closer. "My revenge is ensuring you live with the consequences of your choices. The same courtesy you and Preston planned to extend to me." Her composure finally cracked. "I did love you once. In the beginning. Perhaps. But love without loyalty is meaningless." He checked his watch. "Your 15 minutes are nearly up. I suggest you take the deal. The alternative is far worse." When the proceedings resumed, both Vanessa and Preston accepted the terms. As the judge finalized the arrangements, Dominic sat perfectly still, his face betraying nothing of the satisfaction he felt. The machinery of his revenge had operated precisely as designed, grinding his enemies to dust without mercy. 3 months later, Dominic stood at the observation deck of his newest project, a sleek tower of glass and steel that would define Philadelphia's changing skyline. Mason joined him, surveying the construction progress below. Walsh Development's assets were auctioned off yesterday, Mason reported. We secured 3 of their prime locations at a fraction of market value. Dominic nodded. And the Harmon situation? Old Man Harmon's firm survived the investigation, though significantly diminished. They've been quiet since Brooke delivered that confession you wanted. And Natalie? Mason hesitated. Gregory's in remission. The treatment worked. They're moving to Colorado next month. Something flickered across Dominic's face. A momentary softening quickly suppressed. Good for them. You could call her Dom. Before they leave, Dominic remained silent, his gaze fixed on the rising structure below. After a moment, he changed the subject. The structural reinforcements for the East Wing, are they completed to specification? Mason sighed, recognizing the deflection. Yes, everything is proceeding exactly according to your plans. As always. That evening, alone in his condo, Dominic received notification that Vanessa had given birth, a son, 2 weeks premature. The paternity test had already confirmed what they all knew. Preston was the father. According to the terms of their agreement, she would leave Pennsylvania after serving her reduced sentence, taking the child with her. He stood on his balcony, glass of whiskey in hand, contemplating the city he had conquered. The revenge that had consumed him for so long was complete. His enemies were vanquished, their lives in ruins. He had won, absolutely and without mercy. Yet victory fell hollow in the silence of his empty home. His phone rang. Diana Wells. I've verified everything, she reported without preamble. Preston's remaining assets have been liquidated and transferred offshore, outside the reach of the authorities. He's planning to flee to Argentina after serving his home confinement, in violation of his probation terms. And Vanessa? Still in the hospital with the baby, but she's been making calls to contacts in California.